Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. I'm here with a C8 Corvette. Yeah, I'm a little late to the game, but for the last couple years I've been hearing from everybody that yeah, the styling might be a little the interior is a little funky, but once you get behind the wheel, the C8 drives like a legit supercar. And I'm here to confirm that it is pretty amazing what Chevrolet has been able to do with a mid-engine car that starts at 60 grand. Now, unfortunately, this thing is maxed out. It's the 3LT with the Z51 and the mag ride suspension, so it ends up costing more like $88,000. In another video, we'll go over sort of living with such a small compact cabin. For now, I want to focus on the performance up here in the canyons. So let's climb in this thing, which is not the easiest task in the world, but for now, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Getting it isn't exactly great, but it's not too terrible. It's a tight cockpit, but the seats are pretty comfortable. Let's fire it up. Push button start. You can hear that 6.2 liter V8 start up. Turn the AC down here for the audio. We've got this very vertical series of buttons. We've got a dial. We've got the drive selection here. You might call it a gear shifter, but it's not a shifter, and I don't know. I've actually kind of gotten used to it and I like it. Now, I've got the front end raised, which adds a good $2,200 to that $88,000 sticker. So let's pull away. Put it in drive by pulling up on that little button there. And here we go. We've got a little lip here, which is why I have the front axle lift system on. But then it will automatically turn off, or I can push the button and it'll go back down. Now you can hear it's pretty quiet back there. That's because the car started up in tour mode. There are all these different drive modes for the C8, and they're a lot of fun to play with and fiddle with, but really when you're up here in the canyons, what you want to do is just press the Z button on the steering wheel. You put it in Z mode, the steering weight goes to as hard as possible, the suspension gets as hard as possible, and the exhaust note, the engine and trans shift points, it's all as hardcore as they'll allow. And I think it plays with the traction control a little bit. Now in town, I've been playing with my own settings, but we'll get into that a little bit later. For now, let's talk about 495 horsepower, because this does have the additional 5 extra horsepower from the Z51 package's exhaust that's now fully opened up in Z mode. And you can see it's definitely a little bit bumpy here with these uneven roads in Topanga. One of the very best parts about the C8 is that mag ride suspension, and it's an absolute must if you're thinking about buying one of these things. You can get the mag ride with or without Z51, which is nice, and it costs $1,900. When you put the mag ride in the softest setting, it's pretty soft and comfortable in town for a tight, low, mid-engined supercar. So here we go. We're getting to some more open roads after seeing just some construction. And one thing I can do, even though I'm in Z mode, it's still shifting for me with the 8-speed dual clutch, but I can put it into manual shift mode, and then I've got paddle shifters on the steering wheel. Revving it up a little bit higher, and you can start to hear that Z51 exhaust and the engine, which is directly behind my head. And I love that, but the benefits of mid-engine weight distribution are much more important than the sound when it comes to the C8. You start pushing it, and you just pop it with a shift of the paddle shifters. No manual, as we all know. A manual would have been great, but the 8-speed dual clutch is pretty solid. It shifts very quickly, not quite like PDK status, not quite even, I would say, Volkswagen GTI DCT status, but I can say that this 8-speed dual clutch is the smoothest shifting dual clutch when you're driving in town, and up here it does the job just fine. Now I'm not going to fully redline it the whole time because you won't be able to hear me talk, but let's just say that when you get up into the highest RPMs, it's plenty loud with the windows down. Putting that engine in the mid-mounted location transforms the C8 into a borderline supercar at a fraction of the price. The grip up here is absolutely incredible. The balance and composure of this car blows my mind. once you get all of the drive modes fine-tuned, that is, because the steering is, let's call it sloppy when you're not in the firmest setting. It's like you can turn the steering wheel a half inch, and then like a half second later it actually starts turning. But once you get it put to the sportiest mode, it's pretty telepathic, especially for an electric assist power steering system, which, as we all know, is not quite as awesome as hydraulic assist. We do have to talk about the shape of the steering wheel. I wasn't sure I would like it, but for sporty driving, I actually really like it. I'll drive like this in town, which is enjoyable. The only problem is the flat bottom here, my knuckles don't fit in the gap. I got, normal size hands. They're not tiny. They're not too huge though, and it would be nice, because I love to, if I'm in town with a flat bottom steering wheel, to just drive like this. Instead I have to sort of cock my wrist like that. Not too great. But you get up here and you've got plenty of power coming into turns and a ton of grip. The tires are 245, 305, Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, and they do really well. But the chassis itself is contributing to that a ton. It's just flat. It gets that perfect little bit of body roll right there, and then it sort of squats as you give it a little bit of throttle, and you come out and you're going way faster than you probably thought. Now I should shift up to help you hear my voice. Now, surprisingly, because probably largely due to that 6.2 liter V8, the C8 weighs 3,647 pounds. And that is a surprising number. When I first took this thing up here, I would have guessed it weighed more like 3,300 pounds, which is a testament to the suspension and chassis engineering, but it is a little disappointing, and that weight really starts to show up when you're not going uphill and you're going downhill and you start having to punch the brakes a little harder. Now the Z51 package does come with upgraded performance brakes, and they've got a lot of initial bite. Right there I hit them pretty hard, and they bring the car down in speed quite quickly. In town, plenty of bite, and you can play with that in the drive modes also. But after that initial bite, they then start to sort of soften up. And I've been up here and experienced some brake fade, which is kind of disappointing in a car with the upgraded brakes. Taking this onto a track, I'd probably want to replace the rotors and pads with something a little more potent. You can hear the engine is loud, but it's not crazy loud. The shifts are quick, but they're not crazy quick. The impressive part is the handling. Coming down in here, I shifted late there, but you can see I'm sort of leaning over a bit and then just right where I want it. We've got the line on the steering wheel, but you really don't need it. It's black on black anyways, which is fairly silly, because you're just going right where you place the car. You can take a nice little line here, go from the inner curve at the apex out to the outside, and surprisingly, I had to measure my garage, single car garage, and Google the C8's width because I was worried it wouldn't fit. This thing is actually narrower than a Lotus Evora GT, but it's got a longer wheelbase, which I think contributes to the sense of stability, especially with a V8 mounted amidships. I think it could use probably another 2 inches of width, but what do you think that's gonna be like in the Z06? And apparently Chevy told me that they've got a fair number of C8s that they can sell right now, I think because everybody is waiting for the Z06. So if you order one of these, people aren't ordering them and you can get one right away, which is in contrast to literally the entire automotive industry right now. My friend has a pre-order on an Amira, which is the next level from the Evora GT, coming from Lotus later this summer, and he was initially told he would be getting a first edition. He is now probably waiting until 2023. So it's nice to know that there is a sports car that you can buy at this price point that is incredible, and if you can live with the design, you can have it right now. And the truth is, there really isn't that much in the way of competition for the C8 at this price point. If you get a cheap one like a stripper with no options, just the 1LT, you're looking at low 60s. That's incredible for a mid-engine sports car bordering on a supercar. And yeah, you'll have to live with probably less of the adjustable drive modes and 5 less horsepower. But I defy anyone to tell me that they can feel the difference in 5 horsepower when we're talking about 490 horsepower. Yeah, okay, you can feel 1% when you're getting slammed back into your seats. You can see I'm taking these corners pretty fast. I'm not blasting out of them because we're on public roads, but just holding speed up in this thing is very impressive. And the steering is nice and firm, which makes it okay for me to have a 3-point belt. Luckily, these seats really do a great job of holding you in. These are the upgraded seats that come with a 3LT package. They're an option on the lower packages, but I'd be curious to test out the other seats because these make getting in and out a little difficult. They're seriously bolstered and I fit great. At 6'1", 165 pounds, a little bit long legs, and cyclist hips, I'm really in here quite nicely. Plenty of headroom, plenty of knee room. The seats are very adjustable. This one goes really far back, but we're up here doing some performance driving, so I'm keeping it moderately further forward. And it goes up and down. Best of all, these seats are in fact ventilated, which if you've watched me on this channel, you know that I'm completely obsessed with ventilated seats. I don't know if you can hear that on the video, but coming through that dip there, we did scrape the front splitter a little bit. That's just part of living with a supercar like this. And luckily, Chevy didn't tack on a ton of carbon fiber, which first of all would have raised the price. And second of all, anytime you damage it, you have to be worried about paying for carbon fiber replacement. Here we'll come out onto sort of like a longer straight highway, and I'll show you some more of the drive mode customization that I've been messing with for the past few days. So, on sort of more of a smoother road, I'll pop it out of manual mode, allow that 8-speed to shift for itself, and then what I've been doing is putting it in my mode, which is customizable. Now, unfortunately, when you come out of Z mode, it doesn't take you into the mode that you were last in. It automatically puts you in tour mode, which changes the gauges, and it shows here that everything is on its softer except the engine/shift is at 1 bump up out of 3. Now, the steering is super light. It's like an old classic American car where you're just driving a boat, and I really don't like that. The suspension is nice and soft, which is good when you're in tour mode, but to counteract that, I go on this dial, and, well, first of all, we have to talk about using the dial is really annoying. They put this cover over it, and so it's like hard to get to. It's a little firmer than you would like when you can't really reach it too well. And then there's a solid 3-second delay. So watch this. I turn the dial and it just popped up to tell me what mode I'm in. It tells me faster on the gauge, but unfortunately, it doesn't tell me which mode is left or right of the one that I'm in. So you end up just guessing which way you're going. I mean, maybe if you own this thing for a lot longer, you would know, but now I'm in tour mode. And finally, I got over to my mode. The problem is also it doesn't go like around. So you go from one end, and if you reach the other end and you haven't found the mode you want, you have to go all the way back. You can't just keep spinning. It's kind of a design flaw. Maybe they'll mess with some of the programming for the Z06. So I always keep it in Z mode when we're up here in the canyons driving it aggressively. You know, if you were on the track, there is a track mode, but Z mode and track mode, as far as I can tell, are the same other than the performance data logger, which is part of the Z51 package. For in-city driving, I put it into my mode, which I customized for the firmest steering because I want that feedback and the softest suspension with the engine at 1 dot up and the transmission shifts at the least aggressive. So I'll pop out of it, pop back into my mode, and I've got the brake feel 1 dot up also. So, you know, it's sort of the perfect combination of driving in town. You still feel like you're in a comfortable car, but you'll also feel like you're still in a mid-engine sports car. So it's a good blend, and if you were buying this thing, you definitely want to be able to play with all that, especially the steering and suspension. Now, I don't know if a 1LT will allow you to mess with the steering weight. I know you can get the mag ride suspension on the 1LT, but can you then mess with the steering weight? It's a good question, and one that I will probably ask Chevy once I get a chance. So turning back on to Payuma here, I will put it back into Z mode, and manual shift mode because this is a more fun road. The traction control is pretty generous. And that's what happens if you redline it. It doesn't shift for you. I love that. You can sort of just ping it off the red line. But the truth is that you sort of start losing power at about 5,500 RPM. That peak of 495 is around there. The peak torque is like 4,200, I think. It's 470 pound-feet of torque, which is nice, but it's more about that low-end linear torque made possible by a V8 engine. That's something that some of the C8's competitors don't have. You're talking $60,000 to $88,000 for a mid-engine sports car. The only real comparisons are the Boxster and Cayman. A Boxster base costs around $60,000, and a Cayman GT4 is up at around $100,000. Now you can get a Cayman S, but that torque figure just isn't gonna come close to the C8, and your peak power is also not gonna be up there. Now, on the other hand, you can get a Cayman or a Boxster with a stick shift, which Porsche enthusiasts will always point out, and then the Emira, which is forthcoming, if you can get on the list, will also have a stick shift. It'll be probably closer to $80,000, and I think with the supercharged V6, its torque figures, and it's gonna weigh probably 500 pounds less than this car, will make it fairly comparable. It will also be wider, which is surprising, with a shorter wheelbase. So it'll feel a lot touchier. It'll have the hydraulic steering that makes driving on these roads all the more enjoyable. And honestly, I think it's gonna look a lot better too. Luckily, we've got plenty of passing power. Pop down into second gear there. And first and second gear in this car are very close ratios, which is great. Third is a little bit longer and good for the long straightaways. The overall power is super impressive, and we're gonna pull off here and bring this review to an end. Here in Topanga, this car absolutely excels. It's so fun to drive hard in the curves, on the straightaways. It's got plenty of power to get you in trouble, and the chassis is just spectacular. It could use better brakes. I don't really like the way it looks inside or out, but for the money, I honestly don't know if you can beat it. After having this thing for a week, I'm basically at the point of saying this is like 70% of a McLaren for a quarter to a third of the price. And that's pretty good. Chevy did a great job of turning the C8 into a legit mid-engine sports car bordering on supercar at an affordable entry price. Now, we'll go into more of living with that mid-engine layout in our next video with this C8, but I hope you learned something watching me push this thing here in the canyons. If you did, let us know what you liked, let us know what you want to know more about, and check out HotCars to learn everything there is about the forthcoming Z06, about the hybrid, about the electric Corvette, because we know those are on the horizon. Thanks again for watching, and as always, before you sign off, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks.